A few months ago, my cousin Emily asked to borrow my favorite jacket, just for one night. Now, I'm not usually the type to get overly attached to clothes, but this jacket was different. It wasn't designer or anything flashy, but it had that perfect fit you don't come across twice. I had it tailored years ago, the sleeves shortened just enough, the waist taken in slightly, and I'd even swapped out the original buttons for ones that looked a little more polished. It was one of those pieces that quietly made any outfit look expensive. Because I've had things mysteriously disappear at family events before, I've developed a small habit. I sew a tiny cloth label inside my nicer items. Nothing fancy, just my first name and the year stitched in by hand. It's crooked, imperfect, but it's mine. So when Emily asked, I hesitated for a second, but she promised. She said it would be one night, no food, no smoking, she'd hang it up properly, and she'd bring it back the next day. She even laughed and said, I know how you are about your stuff. That should have been my first warning sign. The next day came and went. No jacket. I texted her casually, Hey, hope the event went well. Can you drop off the jacket today? She replied with a quick, OMG, I totally forgot. I'll bring it next week. Annoying, but fine. Life happens. Next week rolled around. Nothing again. I followed up, a little less casual this time. She said she was out of town, then it was work, then it was some vague excuse about being busy. Each time she sounded a little more irritated, like I was the one being unreasonable for asking about it. At first, I tried to brush it off. It's just a jacket, right? I didn't want to be that person who makes a big deal out of something small. But at the same time, it wasn't just any jacket, it was mine. And more than that, it was the principle of it. Then one night, I was scrolling through social media, and there it was. Emily posing in my jacket. Same fit, same buttons, same slightly uneven sleeve seam that I remembered noticing after the tailoring. There was no doubt about it. Her caption read, New staple, obsessed. And people in the comments were asking where she got it. And she replied, Vintage find. I just stared at my phone for a second, not even sure what I was feeling. It wasn't just that she still had it. It was that she was claiming it like it was hers, like I didn't exist in the story at all. I texted her right away. Hey, that's actually my jacket. Can you please bring it back? I kept it calm, no accusations, no attitude. Her response? Lol, it's literally just a jacket. I blinked at the screen. I tried again, a little firmer. You borrowed it from me. I'd like it back. That's when things took a turn. She said maybe we just had similar jackets, that she didn't remember borrowing anything, that I was making drama over nothing. I actually laughed out loud when I read that, not because it was funny, but because it was so ridiculous. I mean, I knew it was mine. I had literal proof stitched into the inside. But still, her response got under my skin. It made me second-guess myself for a second, like maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I was making a big deal out of something small. Except I wasn't. It wasn't about the jacket anymore. It was about the way she was acting. Like I was crazy, like I imagined the whole thing, like my stuff didn't matter. So I stopped arguing. I didn't reply to her last message. I didn't push. I didn't bring it up again. Instead, I waited. A couple weeks later, my aunt hosted a small family get-together. Nothing fancy, just coffee, desserts, people chatting in the living room, someone passing around a baby while everyone took turns cooing over it. And right on cue, Emily walked in, wearing the jacket, like she wanted to make a point. Or maybe she thought I'd just stay quiet to avoid a scene. I watched her for a minute from across the room. She looked completely comfortable, laughing, talking, acting like everything was normal, like she hadn't lied straight to my face. And in that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to argue with her privately anymore. If she wanted to pretend it was hers, then fine. I'd let the truth speak for itself. I walked over with the sweetest, calmest tone I could manage. That looks really good on you. Where did you end up getting it? I love that cut. She lit up immediately, clearly not expecting that. Right? She said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. I scored it ages ago. I just never wore it. I nodded like I was impressed. "Wow, no way," I said. "Can I see the inside? I did a little repair on mine once, and I'm curious if it's the same style." And that's when I saw it, that tiny flicker of panic in her eyes. She shifted slightly, like she was about to step back, but it was already too late. I reached gently toward the collar, pinched the inner seam, and flipped it open. And there it was, my crooked little label. My name, my year, exactly where I had sewn it. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't make a dramatic scene. I just smiled softly and said, "Oh good, it is mine. I'm so relieved, I thought I lost it." And just like that, the entire room went quiet. The silence hit the room in a way that felt almost physical. It wasn't loud or dramatic, no one gasped or shouted, but conversation stopped mid-sentence. Forks paused halfway to plates, and every pair of eyes slowly shifted between me and Emily. You know that kind of silence? The kind where everyone understands exactly what just happened without a single word needing to be said. Emily's face changed instantly. The confident smile she'd been wearing just seconds ago slipped, replaced by a flush that crept up from her neck to her cheeks. For a moment, she looked like she might actually say something honest, but instead, she laughed. Not a normal laugh, too loud, too forced, the kind people use when they're trying to cover something up. "Oh my God," she said, waving her hand like it was all a joke. "You're seriously embarrassing me right now." I stayed calm. I didn't match her energy. "You embarrassed yourself," I replied evenly, "when you decided keeping it was easier than giving it back." A couple of people shifted uncomfortably. Someone in the kitchen pretended to be very interested in rearranging dessert plates. My aunt, who had been sitting nearby, looked between us with a frown that said she was starting to put the pieces together. Emily stepped closer to me, lowering her voice just enough to make it seem private, even though everyone could still hear the tension. "Why are you making a big deal out of this?" she hissed. "It's just a jacket." There it was again, that same line, like if she repeated it enough times it would magically become true. I looked at her for a second, really looked this time, not just at the situation, but at the pattern, the excuses, the deflection, the way she tried to make me feel small for expecting basic respect. "It's not about the jacket," I said quietly. "It's about you lying." That landed. Her expression hardened, and for a split second I saw irritation turn into something sharper, like she was more annoyed at being caught than sorry for what she did. Before she could respond, I reached for the jacket. It was draped over the back of a nearby chair now, probably because she got too warm, or maybe because deep down she didn't want to be wearing it when the truth came out. I picked it up casually, like it was the most normal thing in the world, and slipped it on. It fit exactly the way it always had. Perfect. Familiar. Mine. I smoothed the sleeves and adjusted the collar, then turned and walked toward the kitchen without another word, like this entire situation had already resolved itself. Behind me, I could hear Emily trying to catch up. "Seriously? You're just going to take it?" she said, her voice rising now. I didn't turn around, because what was there left to say? Before she could follow me any further, my aunt spoke up. "Emily," she said, her tone firm in a way I hadn't heard before, "why would you lie about something like that?" That stopped her, completely. There's something about being called out by an older family member that hits differently. It's harder to dodge, harder to twist. "I didn't lie," she shot back, but it sounded weaker now, less convincing. "You just said you scored it ages ago," my aunt replied, "and now it has her name sewn inside it?" No one else spoke, but you could feel the shift in the room. People weren't confused anymore. They were choosing sides, even if silently. Emily looked around, like she was searching for someone to back her up. No one did. Her shoulders tensed, and for a second it looked like she might double down again, argue harder, push the narrative further. But instead, she grabbed her bag. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. "I'm not staying here to be attacked over something so stupid." And just like that, she walked out. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the frame. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then, slowly, the room started to come back to life. Conversations resumed, but softer this time, more careful. There were a few glances in my direction, some sympathetic, some curious, but no one made a big deal out of it, which, honestly, I appreciated. I didn't want a scene. I never did. I leaned against the kitchen counter, trying to steady the mix of emotions running through me. Relief was the biggest one. I had my jacket back, finally. But there was also a lingering frustration, not because of what happened, but because of how easily it could have been avoided. All she had to do was return it. That's it. No confrontation, no awkward family moment, no slammed doors, just basic respect. My aunt walked into the kitchen a minute later, drying her hands on a towel. She looked at me, then at the jacket, and gave a small nod. "I'm glad you said something," I said. I shrugged lightly. I tried to handle it privately. "I know, and you did the right thing." There was a pause. Then she added, "She's been getting a little too comfortable lately, taking things that aren't hers, not just stuff." That didn't surprise me as much as it probably should have. I guess this wasn't really about one jacket after all. It was just the first time she got caught in a way she couldn't talk her way out of. I ran my fingers along the inside seam, feeling the edge of the small cloth label I'd stitched in years ago. Something so simple, but it told the whole truth. No arguing, no debating, just facts. And in the end, that tiny, crooked piece of fabric said more than I ever could. The rest of the evening settled into something close to normal, but not quite. There was still that quiet awareness in the air, like everyone had witnessed something they weren't expecting. No one brought it up directly, but I caught a few looks here and there. Small smiles, slight nods, the kind of silent support people give when they don't want to stir things up further. I stayed in the kitchen for a bit, helping clean up, more for something to do than anything else. Every now and then, my hand would brush against the sleeve of my jacket, just to remind myself it was actually back where it belonged. It felt strange how something so simple could carry so much weight. After a while, I stepped outside for some air. The sun was starting to go down, and the quiet outside felt like a reset after everything that had just happened. That's when my phone buzzed. Emily, of course. I stared at her name on the screen for a second before opening the message. "You're actually unbelievable. That was petty and vindictive." I let out a small breath, not even surprised. Another message came in right after. "You care more about stuff than family. It's honestly sad." I read that one twice, not because it hurt, but because it was so backwards it almost didn't make sense. I typed back slowly, choosing my words carefully. "I care about basic respect. If you had just returned it when I asked, none of this would have happened." I watched the typing bubble appear, disappear, then appear again. Finally, her reply came through. "It wasn't a big deal until you made it one." I shook my head slightly at that. That's always how it goes, isn't it? Someone crosses a line, and when you finally call it out, suddenly you're the problem. I didn't respond again. There was nothing left to say that would change anything. Some people don't see the issue because admitting it would mean admitting they were wrong, and not everyone is willing to do that. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and stayed outside for a few more minutes, letting the cool air settle everything. By the time I went back in, the mood inside had softened. Someone had put music on, desserts were being passed around again, and the earlier tension had faded into the background. My aunt caught my eye from across the room and gave me a small, reassuring smile. And just like that, things moved on. But not everything went back to the way it was. Over the next few days, I heard bits and pieces through the usual family channels. Apparently, Emily had tried to vent to a couple of relatives, framing the whole situation like I had publicly humiliated her over just a jacket. But there was a problem with that version of the story. Too many people had been there. Too many people had seen the label. Too many people had heard her say it was hers. It's hard to rewrite a story when the truth already played out in front of an audience. So the narrative didn't really stick. If anything, it backfired a little. A few relatives started keeping a closer eye on their own belongings when she was around. Nothing obvious, nothing confrontational, but enough to notice. And that said everything. As for me, I didn't bring it up again. I didn't need to. I had my jacket back, and more importantly, I had my answer. It wasn't about whether she could borrow something. It was about whether she respected me enough to return it. And now I knew. A couple of weeks later, I was getting ready to head out and reached for the jacket again. As I slipped it on, I caught sight of the inside seam in the mirror. That small, crooked label was still there. My name, the year. Simple, clear, undeniable. I smiled to myself, shaking my head a little. At the time I started sewing those labels in, it felt like a small, almost unnecessary habit. Just something I did because I was forgetful and a little cautious. I never thought it would end up proving a point like that. But in a weird way, it felt satisfying. Not in a dramatic revenge kind of way, just quiet confirmation. The truth doesn't always need a big moment. Sometimes it just needs to be there, steady, consistent, impossible to argue with. And that's exactly what that little piece of fabric was. No shouting, no back and forth, no endless explanations, just proof. As for Emily, things stayed a little distant after that. We still saw each other at family events, exchanged the occasional polite hello, but that easy, casual closeness wasn't there anymore. And honestly, that was fine, because respect matters more than pretending everything is okay when it's not. In the end, it was never really about the jacket. It was about boundaries. And sometimes the clearest way to set one is to let the truth speak for itself.